Hello again and welcome back, ladies, gents, Pikachus and Muslims or non-Muslims of the world, pretty much anyone who might be watching. We're going to carry on breaking down the Quran as we do every single day, and as I always say before I get started, if you have any doubts over my factual accuracy or you don't believe any things that I say are in here, please feel free to pick one of these things up from any good bookshops or your local Amazon store. And after having read it painstakingly and slowly, because it's quite difficult to understand and it does take a lot of work to get through because it's pretty boring, once you've done that, you will realise every single word I've said in here is true and accurate to what is in this Quran. So, let's carry on from where we left off last time. And where we left off last time was Allah turning around to his Muslims having been defeated and letting the Israelites escape, watching them set up Israel and being happy as Larry with Moses. Allah is now making excuses to his Muslims and saying, look guys, it's not how it looks, it's definitely not what you think, and by the way, the reason you're doing so poorly is nothing to do with me, or even the Israelites, it's because you didn't worship me enough, get on your knees and bow and pray. So, with that in mind, let's carry on with the next line. 63. Allah now lists a bunch of accusations against the Israelites, including violent uprisings against their own leader, slave trading their daughters to their enemies, killing each other after false accusations, lying, thieving, and generally breaking their covenant to Allah, which they definitely have, because it says so in here, and if you disagree, you're fucking dead. So, let's break that down. Why would Allah be listing a bunch of accusations like these to his Muslims while he's making excuses for not keeping his promises and saying, those guys over there are evil and bad, and here are some direct accusations and particular reasons why you don't want to be like them? Well, let me tell you. It's because if you're an Egyptian in this situation, you have just lost all of your slaves. Not only have you just lost all of your slaves, but a large amount of your heavily armoured, heavily trained, expensive soldiers just got washed away in the Red Sea by Moses waving a stick and making the waters crash over the soldiers. So you've lost your slaves, you've lost your soldiers, you've got no food, your firstborn sons have all just died, and you're pretty angry about this. Particularly because Allah has been promising you that the exact opposite of that would happen, and then you'd be happy and fed and you'd have tons of slaves and you'd be really, really joyfully worshipping Allah because he's done all this cool stuff for you. So he's making excuses and making these accusations against the Israelis to the Muslims. In my view, this isn't expressly in the book, but this is what I think. Because the Muslims are looking at each other, even though they can't say it, because if they have any doubts, they're dead. They're looking at each other and there's whispers going around saying, why aren't we doing what those guys are doing? Look how well they're doing over there. They're literally about to set up Israel, a new kingdom in the desert. And even though they're in the middle of the desert, somehow they've got loads of water. They've got loads of food. They're literally sacrificing the best bit of their food to this God we got told doesn't exist. And having group hugs before they set up this town. How is all that going so well for them? After Allah told us he was going to kill them for not worshipping him and reading this and following it. How? Maybe their God's real and Allah isn't all he's cracked up to be. That is why he's saying this. And let's go through some of the accusations he makes of the Israelites. Violent uprisings against their leader, who by the way is Moses, who remember has had shade thrown on him by Allah for possibly killing a guy. And we're saying that he's an evil Jew, we shouldn't like him. So that's reiterated here by Allah saying they're having violent uprisings against Moses because he killed a guy, he's bad. Don't do any of the stuff that he told his people to do. He's bad. If you follow him, you will also be steeped in evil and burn in the fires of hell, like we saw in the last verse. Then he says, they're slave trading their daughters to their enemies. Which, by the way, is the Egyptians. The Israelis' only enemy at this point is literally the Egyptians they just escaped from. But nevertheless, Allah is saying to his Muslims, don't be like those guys. They're disgusting evil apes and filthy, dirty Jews. And we know this because they're slave trading their own daughters to people who hate their daughters and will mistreat them. So don't be like them. And thirdly, killing each other after false accusations, which again refers back to the previous passage that we went through yesterday, where Allah claims that Moses is bad because he kills people, tries to hide it, covers the bodies up with sand and lies about it, and then other people in the tribe copy this, and the Jews are so evil they're just killing each other at random. It's just mayhem over there, it's chaos over there. Don't be like them. Even though they look like they're having a great time and they got this Israel thing going and they got water and food and they're happy. No, they're not really. Really what's happening is they're just about to have a violent uprising against their leader, murderers. They're slave trading away their daughters, which you'd only do if you were poor, so they're also poor despite what it looks like. And they're even killing each other and lying about each other just so they can fight. They're fucking morons over there. They're evil, aggressive, violent, murdering, raping psychos, and they're selling their own daughters. Don't be like them. That's what this means. Oh yeah, and the last bit, and generally breaking their covenant to me, being Allah in the book. So he caps off all that horrible gossipy stuff that he's saying about the Israelis to his Muslims. He's saying to the Muslims, look guys, I know how it looks. It might look bad. Don't think like that though. What you've got to think is this. Those guys, even though they look rich, happy and fed, are poor, starving and crap. And it's because they are generally breaking their covenant to me, who is Allah. Which means if you don't stop breaking your covenant and get to the worship, this is what's going to happen to you too. I'll carry on. He then asks, why do they do these things in the incorrect way? Not as I, Allah, have commanded in here. And he says it's a disgraceful, evil lifestyle which he will punish in the worst way on the day of judgment because Allah knows all. So what does he mean by this, if we break it down? So he starts off by saying, why do they do these things in the incorrect way? So what he's actually saying there is all that bad stuff they're doing, all that evil stuff they're doing, the only reason it's bad is because they're not doing it the way that he's told them to in the Quran. So selling the daughters, killing each other, uprising against their boss, lying, thieving, making false accusations, all this stuff, which would only be bad for them because they made the promise to God. God gave them the commandments not to do that. But that doesn't matter. That's not the reason it's bad. Forget about their covenant. They're God's fake. The reason that it's bad is because they haven't been expressly instructed to do this by the Quran, which is Allah, which is Islam. That's the only reason it's bad, not because they're actually doing it. No, because they're not doing it for Allah. That's what this means. We'll go on to the next verse. 64. These people, aka the nasty, sneaky Jew dum-dums that we hate, these people always sell heaven for the price of the mundane. They deserve the worst of Allah's wrath. No quarter shall be given at the day of judgment, none. What does this mean? These people, with the quote marks, and that is actually in the Quran, word for word, these people, quote unquote, that's referring to the earlier bit where Allah expressly says to the Jews as they're escaping, you Jews are evil, dumb, filthy apes. Filthy ape Jews, we hate you, we're going to kill you all. That's what he's referring to here. So he's saying, these filthy, dumb Jew apes that we hate and we're going to kill later, they are actually selling their salvation for like the price of a few bricks or, you know, a computer game. Or he's saying they're selling heavenly, amazing salvation from God type stuff, you know, spiritual salvation and eternity. They're selling that as if it's like, you know, a set of clothes or an old car or something. They don't understand the value of things. They're dumb, stupid, evil Jews. Don't forget that. That's what they're saying here. And then the last bit, they deserve the very worst of Allah's wrath. No quarter will be given. So again, I feel Allah here is still in the making excuses to his Muslims mode to try and get them away from the rebellious thoughts they must be thinking after having been failed by him so severely. And all the while seeing how well Israel are doing, even though they're supposedly evil apostate Jews who should be dead already, and they're not. So the reason he's saying this, they deserve the worst of Allah's wrath, is because I think the Egyptians, they kind of know Allah's wrath already because they're living under this guy. They've seen enough of Allah's wrath, and it's not enough for him to just say they're going to get my wrath too, because that makes them have something in common. And that would make the rebellious feelings in the Egyptians even worse, because they'd be thinking, these guys are our brothers, they're getting treated like crap as well by this Allah guy. We should go over there and join them, and they're having a great time, and we can worship their God, and then we'll be fat with food and water and everything else. And we'll be having a great time too. Why don't we do that? That is why he's saying this. He's directly heading off the possibility that his pissed off Egyptians are going to start thinking, not only are we going to leave this Allah guy, though we can't kill him, we're going to go over there and actually have a great time in Israel. Why don't we try and be friends with them? No, that is expressly forbidden. Allah definitely doesn't want that to happen. That's like his main goal, is not to be friends with those guys, not to go and join up with those guys, and definitely not to feel anywhere in your head that you should worship their God and then be happy. No, that's what this means. So let's carry on. 65. Allah claims to have given Moses the Torah and a bunch of prophets, and also made Jesus able to perform miracles at a later stage, and complains that these stupid Jews wouldn't accept them and even killed some of them, or just straight up said all of these guys are false prophets, don't believe a fucking word they say. So, breaking that down, I'm making this a bit more colourful than I should. I'll try not to swear in future, but it's important that you understand the emotion in Allah while he's saying this. That's why I'm doing that. So, Allah claims to have given Moses the Torah and a bunch of prophets. So, remember, Allah is still speaking to his pissed off Egyptians, trying to sweeten the deal for them, because he knows they're probably thinking about rebellion, or at the very least, exiling Allah away and trying to be friends with the Israelis, and he doesn't want that at all. So what he's saying here is, Allah claims to have given Moses the Torah and a bunch of prophets. What he's saying is, those guys over there having a great time, all that stuff is due to me, Allah, in the book. And the reason they can continue doing it without me there, even though we're now enemies with them and they've completely ignored me and they're worshipping another god, is not because of that worship of the other god that's the reason they're doing well. It's because I gave them their holy book, even though it's completely different to the one here that we're using. No, the one they've got was also written by me, Allah, in the book, and that's the reason they're doing well. I gave them Moses and their other prophets, and I gave them their book. So really, essentially, they're just extended bad Muslims, and the only reason they're not currently dead and they seem to be doing well is because of the secret worship to me, Allah, in the book. Brackets, and also made Jesus able to perform miracles. Now, there's some debate in the scholarly world whether this bit was added in later and should actually be part of the Quranic manuscript or not. But it is included in there, so Muslims won't have any of this doubt or argument. They will probably kill you if you ask them if this is true or not, because it is in there. But I just want to make you know, and you can go and search on Google yourself to find this out, this bit may have been added later. Brackets, and he also made Jesus able to perform miracles. Now, keep in mind the time we are talking about. Moses has yet to set up Israel and is still alive. But Allah is saying to the Egyptians, just before Israel was set up, 650 years before Christ is going to be born, Allah is prophesying Jesus, effectively here, if this is to be believed. So what Allah is claiming is, not only did he give the Torah to the Jews, and the reason they're doing well is because they're following his commands out the Torah, even though they're doing it in an apostate fashion, they're not following this one as well, because this one supersedes that one, is what we're supposed to think. When Jesus appears and performs his miracles, it ain't going to be anything to do with that guy. That God's not real. Jesus is only doing miracles because of Allah. That's why he said that, and that's what you're supposed to think. 66. They say, we have all we need to worship here, and we need nothing from you guys, so we're not going to bother with your Quran, your Allah worship, and we're not going to need anything from you. In fact, if you don't need any more of our time, we're going to go and set up Israel now and leave you guys well alone. You got to love this, haven't you? So, breaking that down, the reason he's saying that, he's still talking to his pissed off Egyptians, still trying to sweeten the deal, even though he's been doing this for like 4 verses now, and the narrative of Allah, which this whole book is momentarily stopped dead in its tracks, because we need to ensure, before we carry on with the Allah story, that the Egyptians are still loyal and worshipping, and they're not thinking about going over there. So, what Allah says to his Egyptians is, they say, they being Moses and the Israelites, they say, we have all we need to worship God, and we don't need anything from you guys, and we're going to leave you well alone. So effectively, we're not going to punish you. We're not going to come back later and try and kill you when we get bigger than you, even though all the shit and the horrible stuff you just did to us and the fact you want to kill us, we're going to leave you well alone, and that's fine. But this is totally wrong, is what Allah says after that. This is totally wrong. They have Allah disease, remember, and that's specified in the language. They have a horrible curse, Allah disease. The blasphemy of the Jews shall forever be cursed. So he caps off his bit about the Israelis being bad, secret agent Allah over there, making them have a good time and set up Israel. That's still Allah's fault, but he's still claiming to the Egyptians and making sure they believe, and they have no doubt Even though they're having a great time and they seemingly don't need anyone else apart from their God and Moses and themselves, even though they're not going to be coming back and begging for water or money or anything else, they've literally said, we're going to leave you Egyptians alone. We don't need anything from you. We're not going to come and attack you. Just leave us the hell alone in Israel. We're going to do our own thing now. No, this is totally wrong. So even though Allah said they're only doing that because he has got them to do it, they're only doing it because Allah has compelled them to do it and they're secretly worshipping him. No, it's totally wrong. So if you think about it, Allah is saying his own mind control of the Israelites, his own prayer from the Israelites to make their town good. It's totally wrong, even despite the fact that Allah is causing them to do it. Remember that. This is totally wrong. Allah disease is upon them. Now, correct me if I'm wrong. These guys over here are doing well. We can see that in the text. Allah himself is telling the Egyptians excuses for why they're doing well and Egyptians are not doing so well as they are. So why would he say and have it believed that those guys over there are actually cursed and have Allah disease? It just doesn't make any sense. And also saying the final bit of the verse is the blasphemy of the Jews will be cursed forever. So he's saying, kind of between the lines there, without it being specifically said, what you're supposed to think is, even though they're doing well now, and it seems like they're having a great time, and it seems like they're all enjoying themselves, even though a minute ago we tried to throw shade on them and say, Moses is a murderer, they're all killing each other and it's all chaos, but then we went back to, no, it's really good and we're making excuses for why it's good. This guy thinks in snakes, I swear, which, remember that will be important by the end. Even though all that stuff is happening in Israel and we've tried to throw shade on it and we've said it's not real, it's actually just the face. Underneath the face, they're all starving and arguing and killing each other, selling their daughters and blah, 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 and, you know, breaking a covenant. The blasphemy of the Jews will be cursed forever means this won't last. They're just building up food and gold and pretty girls and wives and everything else so that we can go and ransack them and take it later. That's what this means. And the blasphemy of the Jews, even though they're secretly worshipping Allah and Allah's graciously and mercifully giving them all this stuff and making Israel for them, and they're worshipping and they're saying, Allah, how do we worship? And he's telling them, you know, with his grace and mercy, even though his grace and mercy is causing all that good stuff to happen, actually, no, it's temporary, they'll fucking die eventually, and the proof of it is the blasphemy of the Jews will be cursed forever. So this ain't going to last. Forever is going to be cursing the Jews after this ends, which will be quite soon, is what you're supposed to think. 67. And when Allah gives them their holy book, confirming that they are doing it all wrong, even though before that they prayed for victory over us, they wouldn't even recognize victory when it came to them, because they refused the Qurans earlier, and Allah will curse them forever. Now, I know we've been repeating ourselves a little bit here, but at least we're starting to get back to the course of Allah, the narrative of the Quran, and we've stopped having the interjection of prettying up the situation for the Egyptians because they are getting sick of seeing the Israelis do so well and having such a crap time themselves. So what does this mean? Let's break it down. And when Allah gives them their holy book, confirming that they're doing it all wrong, so Allah gave them the Torah, and they're doing really well because he gave them the Torah and it's actually his. But even still, when they get to the end of that book, so he's suggesting they haven't actually read it to its conclusion yet, which is kind of weird because he said earlier that the covenant was done and didn't make any sense anyway and was wrong. Even though the covenant's wrong, doesn't make any sense, doesn't work and is dead, he still gave them the book for it and they still haven't finished reading it. And that's what they're saying here. Even though I gave them their holy book, confirming that they're doing it all wrong, even though before that they prayed for victory over us. So what it's saying is the Israelis are only over there. The only reason they managed to escape and cross the sea and not die is because they were praying to Allah to save them. At the same time that Allah was trying to kill them and shouting, we're going to come and genocidally murder you all after you've set up your town. You see what he's doing there? He's literally saying he's in two places at once and half of him's bad and is trying to kill the Israelis and chase them off, and the other half of him is receiving their prayers and letting them win. And then he says, this is all happening because they refused the Quran's advice and Allah will curse them forever. So he's saying At the time, I thought they were good, and I was letting them go because I thought they had good hearts and they were going to correct their behaviour and come back and be Muslims. But now I know they're back to being evil, nasty, stupid, dumb Jews, and I'm going to curse them forever because they're not doing this, they're doing their other book, and they haven't finished reading it yet, so they should forget the book that I gave them they haven't finished reading and go back to reading this one, rah. It's in there, I'm telling you, even though it makes no bloody sense whatsoever. Allah is like... I feel Allah at this point is like a pissed off ex-girlfriend. He is just in such an angry rage, and he's spitting from the mouth as he blasts everyone within earshot and eyeshot. He doesn't realise that he is literally saying things that directly contradict the last sentence, never mind previous bits of the book. So if this and the last bit we read are supposed to be believed, Moses is bad and good, Moses is a murderer but not a murderer, Israel are having a great time but also a bad time, they're starving but they're also loving it, and they're going to be great and happy because they're praying to Allah, but they're also going to die quite soon, and then in the future they're going to be cursed forever. All those things have to be true unless this and this have made some errors. Let's continue. 68. They sold their souls for nothing when they said no to Allah worship, denying the Quran just because they're jealous of it and that it wasn't solely for them. Humiliation will be the punishment for these disgusting apostates. Let's break this one down, ladies, gents and Pikachus. This is like another chef's kiss moment. So, they, being the Israelites and Moses, they sold their souls for nothing when they said no to Allah worship. You know, just before they escaped, they were like given Christmas dinners after having been revived from death. And it was like, do you want to take our Qurans now and be Muslims now because we revived you and like we're giving you all this cool food? And they finished eating and said, nah, we're going to go set up Israel now. And they left. Because they did that, they sold their souls and they will be damned. Even though Allah said, when people sell their souls and are damned, or in fact, if they don't follow this, they'll be immediately headless and killed and it will be righteous. Even though he said that, he's now saying they sold their souls for nothing when they said no to the Allah worship, but we didn't kill them. Denying the Quran is what they're doing now, and they're denying it because they're jealous that it wasn't only for them. So the reason that Allah is speculating that the Jews don't want to take the Quran on, it's nothing to do with the fact that they've already got one, and they've already got a God and a covenant and everything else, which seems to be working out for them. It's not to do with that, no. The reason they're denying the Quran is because they're jealous that the Quran isn't solely for them. It mentions other people. It doesn't specifically say Allah is favouring the Israelites over everybody else. That's what the assertion here is. And after that, because they were jealous, it wasn't solely for them, humiliation will be the punishment for these disgusting apostates. So what Allah is saying now is, even though I said I'm going to kill them all, no, I've got something even worse planned for them. That's the real reason they're still alive. Even though I said I'd kill them, I've upgraded that now. Not only am I going to kill them, I'm going to keep them alive in the meanwhile and just fucking humiliate the hell out of them. I'm going to make them look stupid. I'm going to make their town look stupid. I'm going to make everything about them look bad. I'm going to make everybody hate them, and they're going to die lonely, depressed apostates like they are. Dumb, stupid, evil Jews. That's what this means. And then we get to our last verse, which I feel caps this off nicely. So at 24 minutes, I'm pretty glad we got there. But this is the best bit of this episode. You'll love this. The Quran even said, you must accept what Allah is telling you. But you just kept saying, nah, thanks. We got our own stuff and we got our own worships already. But they killed our prophets, so they must be lying and bad and stupid and evil. So, let's break that down. Allah's still talking to his Muslims. He's finished having a go at the Israelites and making his excuses now, and I think he's got the Egyptians back on board, so they're no longer thinking about rebellion. They're still a bit pissed off. They're still in a pretty crappy situation with no slaves, no food, no soldiers because they're all dead, and they have to rebuild. Plus, they can see their enemies Israel having a great time over there. So they're not happy, but they're no longer thinking Allah is to blame. So Allah is now gone back to talking about himself and the Quran. Now that he's headed off the immediate trouble, he's back to the whole brainwashing thing that he wants to worship. And he says, the Quran even said, you must accept what Allah is telling you. Like he's saying to the Egyptians, this is what the Israelis should think. You must accept what this is telling you because it says in here that you must accept this. Do you get what he said? Allah is saying, you must accept this, and it says so in here, so it must be true. You must accept what Allah is telling you, but you just kept saying, no thanks, we have our own stuff on our own worship. So the Israelis, when tasked with following this, because this says so, because Allah said so, actually had the gall, the stupidity and the gall to say, no thanks Allah, we've got our own stuff now, we've got our own worship now, we're going to be okay. So you think, well, why is he saying that? Why is he saying that they politely refused and said, we've got our own worship now? But they killed our prophets, so they must be lying and bad and stupid. Aha! Now we arrive at the real reason why Allah has said this. After they claimed that they were being polite, they claimed that they were saying, no thanks, it's okay, we got our own stuff, we got our own God, we're going to stick with that. Bye! And they were polite and walked away. Even though that's what they claimed, really, they killed our prophet. So even though you didn't see them do it and they walked off being polite and nice and said they're not going to try and revenge us, they killed our prophets, guys. Them! Those evil, dumb, stupid Jews over there, they killed our prophets and they must be lying. And that means since they're lying and they killed our prophets, even despite saying they didn't and that they're nice and lovely, even despite that, they must be lying. So they're bad, dumb, stupid Jews. And it's going to be fair enough when we ignore everything they say and end up genociding them all. That's what this means. And that is the end of our reading. So, let's encapsulate that quickly before we get to half an hour. Allah starts listing a bunch of accusations and listing a bunch of shade on the Israelites, but he's still talking to his Egyptians. And at this point, on the first verse we went through, he's trying to sweeten the deal up for the Egyptians, because obviously they're pissed off, they're not getting their own way. None of the promises that were made to them have been fulfilled. They lost all their soldiers, they lost all their firstborn sons. Allah said, I'm going to disease these guys over here and curse them. But it's actually the Egyptians who had the diseases and the curses and lost their firstborn sons. Not only that, they're having to do work now without soldiers to protect them, so they're not feeling particularly secure. And their slaves, 5 minutes ago, are over there eating Christmas dinners on their own now and worshipping another god, and they seem happy as Larry. So that's why Allah has to say, no, don't listen to them. They're having violent uprisings against Moses. They're killing each other. They're lying. They're thieving. They're selling their own daughters because they don't have any food or money, even though it looks like they do. And then he says, why do they do these things in an incorrect way? Why don't they just do it in the name of Allah? Then it would all be fine. He then goes on to say, these people, i.e. the evil, nasty, dumb Jews, these people are nasty, evildoer, sneaky, dumb Jews. They have sold their salvation for the price of nothing. So he's still speaking to the Egyptians and he's saying, don't worry about them. Don't worry about those guys over there looking like they've won, celebrating to their God that they're alive and well and now they're about to set up Israel. Don't worry about that. What's actually happening there is they are making it worse for themselves. They have sold their salvation. So once they've finished looking like they're having a good time and worshipping to their God and eating, when that ends, they're all dead and they're all going to go to hell and it's going to be really bad for them. No quarter will be given, remember, that's the last thing. Allah's going to give them no quarter. So when the time comes for these guys, oh, it's going to be so bad and nasty and evil. It's going to be terrible for them. They'll really regret the fact that they're doing well now. Allah claims to have given Moses a Torah. Well, we know why Allah is claiming the Torah for his own. It's so the Egyptians don't read it. He doesn't want the Egyptians to sneak over there and say, sorry, Israelites, we didn't mean it. Allah tricked us. Can we just read your book quickly to see how you're doing so well? Because we need to be doing well and we're not. Annoying motorbike guy outside. So yeah, now that there's going to be a lot of noise outside, I'm going to finish up here quickly. I think we've gone through enough that we need to go through. The point of these last 8 epithet sentences is to make sure Allah remains in control of the Egyptians without them ever feeling any sorrow or guilt for what they did to the Israelis. Because he knows it's very difficult as a human being to be told one thing while you can clearly see another thing happening. That's confusing and it makes you doubt. But he doesn't want doubt. He wants worship and he wants absolute, everyone obey and bow to me and worship and worship and worship. He doesn't want them even wasting a single minute looking over there. And in fact, this is probably why he makes them worship like 1,000,000 times a day. Right away, first thing in the morning, lunchtime, evening time, dusk, nightfall, and then midnight. Or, I can't remember when exactly it is, but there's a lot of worshipping to Allah throughout the whole day. I think we can see from this, the reason that he enforces this is so there's no opportunity for his Egyptians in their spare time to see what's going on in Israel and think, how are they doing so amazingly well? In the middle of a desert, they should be starving hungry with no water. They should be dead already. From us, never mind the desert. How are they over there having a great time building a kingdom? And happy? How? So that's the reason Allah wants to make sure they don't have any time to do that. They're either working or they're praying or they're asleep. And remember, don't worry about them doing well now, because in the future we're going to go and kill them. It's going to be righteous and they'll definitely deserve it because they're dumb and stupid and evil. And by the way, they killed our prophets, even though that's not described in here. Nobody saw it and we didn't actually see that happen. And there's no evidence of that. That's the reason we're going to go and kill them. They're evil, dumb and stupid. And just in case you didn't know, they kill our prophets. And that is where we will finish our reading. So, conclusions on Allah now is not only that he's controlling, manipulating, and he does tell an awful lot of lies, or at least if they're not lies, he makes a lot of promises that haven't been kept yet. So perhaps he will keep them at some stage, even though thousands of years have passed and he still hasn't kept them. Maybe he'll keep them in future. The other thing we know about Allah is he's extremely jealous about the God of the Israelites. He absolutely hates that. So he keeps telling his Muslims, his Egyptians, no matter how good they look, no matter how good it looks like they're doing over there, just remember, they're not really doing that well. It's only a face that they're showing you. And by the way, any of them that are having a good time are only having a good time because they're praising Allah. But even though they're praising Allah better than you're openly praising Allah, and they're doing better than you are, in the end, whoosh, dead, burning forever, and it will be their own fault. And by the way, they killed our prophet, so they're bad. So that's Allah in a nutshell. Jealous, enraged, very angry, controlling, using the Egyptians as a tool to get at the Israelis because he's at war with God. That's the main thing that we learn here, is that Allah, the reason that he wants to be known as the creator God, the reason he claims that he gave the Torah to the Jews, the reason that he's claiming Christ and he's claiming that Christ's miracles are through him, the reason he wants everybody to worship him isn't like I thought before, just because he's a narcissistic weirdo that loves being worshipped. That is a secondary thing, because he's trying to take it away from God. He hates God. He doesn't want anyone to worship God. He doesn't want anyone to follow God's commands. He wants every single human being on earth to rebel against God. And in doing so, by getting people to worship him, even if they don't know they're doing it, like Adam in the Garden of Eden didn't know he was doing it, by worshipping Allah all the time and following the stuff that's in here, every single word of this being followed and the worship of Allah means you're rebelling against the God of Israel, the creator God. And that's where we'll end our episode. So hope you enjoyed that and you learned something. We're going to stop there. I'll see you tomorrow in the next episode. Until then, take care, Godspeed, God bless, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye now. This book raises a lot of questions, doesn't it? But it doesn't provide much in the way of answers. So if you want those answers provided by me to you, in a factual, logical sense, come back tomorrow and I will see you then. Bye.